Let us be the last to wish you a Happy New Year. This is the Questioning Christianity podcast with Dan and Rob.
Hey, everybody.
The first episode of season 3.
Yeah, I'm excited about that.
I don't know if that's really true. I mean, if it's not really seasons, but it's the third.
When does our season begin and end?
At the beginning of the calendar year.
Oh, okay.
Is what I
so we have a
arbitrarily-
year-long season?
I reckon.
Okay.
I haven't really thought it through.
Well, that's fine.
The other major milestone is that this is episode 35. So we have to.
Oh, yeah, we'll have a big celebration.
Yeah, we have to.
Okay, yeah, we need the little, horns and.
All right. Okay. So we appreciate you guys joining us. I think today's show is going to be kind of interesting. We're going to talk about a story from the book of Luke, a story that Jesus tells. And this one, I think, is a little bit hard to understand. Mm-hmm. And so I've got some questions about it, and we'll try to get into those. We'll listen to the message as well. As we've just come off the holiday season, we've probably all been in or hosted a few holiday parties. So the question for today's show is, who's coming to dinner? And
good question.
I was wondering, did you use any good excuses or bad excuses to try to get out of a holiday party this season?
Well, no, I didn't get invited that much, really,
So it seems like
I try to go to everyone I can.
Okay. Do you ever crash parties?
No, I've never done that.
Yeah.
That's a good plan, though.
You're missing out on a real blessing there, I think.
I think so. Yeah.
I got invited to a
wedding receptions. That would be a really good thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And then you can get some free cake, and depending on what denomination or whatever, there may be
some
beverages and dancing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there will never be dancing at a Baptist wedding.
No. Well,
I messed up. I was going to tell a joke and I messed it up.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, go back and redo it. Well,
you think?
Yeah, sure.
No, it's terrible. The joke is, oh gosh, this is not a good way to start season 3. The joke was, why do Baptists not believe in premarital sex?
It might lead to dancing.
It might lead to dancing.
I wouldn't have got that if you hadn't.
All right. So anyway, I got invited to a New Year's Eve party, and the first question I asked was, who's going to be there?
Mm-hmm.
That's something I think we all kind of wonder. And then I found out I found out that the party was going to be not at my friend's house, but at his friend's house.
Uh-huh.
And so then I'm starting to think, I don't know about those people. And so I came up with an excuse.
Oh, yeah. So you didn't go?
I didn't go.
Based on who might be there?
That's right.
Okay. Well, that fits into our story really well.
How about that?
Yeah.
So what's going on here in Luke chapter 14?
As you said, it's a story that Jesus tells. He tells it in the context of a party. Yeah. He's at a party, and then he tells a story about a party. But the central question, I think, Dan, is the same one that you asked. Okay, who's going to be at the party? Who gets included and who gets excluded? How exclusive is the guest list? Yeah. People make their decisions about whether or not to respond to the invitation to be at the banquet in a positive way based on who will or will not be there.
It seems like religion, Christianity obviously included, but not just Christianity, religion typically tends to want to define who's in and who's out.
Exactly.
And so it's a common question that we deal with today, and I'm assuming it was a common question in Jesus' time too. At least it was one that came up during this party. Very
much so. In fact, they had a whole set of criteria to use in order to determine who would be in and who would be out, who was clean and who was unclean. If you were unclean and therefore couldn't enter the temple, then you certainly wouldn't be at the banquet at the end of the age. That was the common thinking. I guess the argument that I would make, Dan, and this is something that's for us to think about because we still do the same thing today. I believe that Jesus went to great lengths to say over and over and over again, anybody who will come in is invited to come in. I want to, if I can, to try to shift our thinking away from this idea that our religion has this certain formula about how to get our ticket to heaven, and once we do whatever it is that we're supposed to do, say the prayer, get baptized, go through confirmation, share first communion, whatever it is, to get our ticket to heaven, then we're good and we're part of the guest list. Then we're we're included. We're not excluded. But I think I would argue that for Jesus, the guest list is all the world. Everybody is on the guest list. The big question is, will we actually want to be there? Will we actually, at the end of the age, at the great banquet, will we be the kind of people who want to be in the presence of God? Or will we say, I think I'll pass. If this is what the new heaven and new earth is all about, I think I'll just stay outside the gates.
Like I did on New Year's Eve.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
You kind of snubbed your nose at this invitation.
That's right.
Not to say that in a derogatory way, but
I'm a nose snubber.
Yeah, well, you were fearful, or you were just sort of anxious about who might be there, so you didn't go, but you were not excluded from the party.
That's right.
You made that decision on it, which is, totally, you've got that option. We read the Bible and we come away from it maybe with this idea that at the end of the age, everybody's going to be clamoring to get into heaven. Everybody's going to want to be there, but God's going to be standing at the gate or at the judgment throne or whatever, and he's going to say, no, you can't come in, get out. Mm-hmm. But I would argue that if we look at Jesus seriously, God is always saying, no, come on in. The gate's open. The gates will always be open. Come on in. But it's the people who, because of the way that they have been formed as human beings, will make the decision, no, this is just not for me.
And that's a very different visual from a lot of the ways it's been presented to me growing up. And maybe, I don't know if it's a Bible Belt thing or if it's a Baptist thing or it was just a local church, the specific church that I went to. I've heard this enough to where I still remember it at my current age or whatever, that this idea of like this big screen in heaven, and you're like, all your sins would be on display, and there'd be like a courtroom or something, and then Jesus would say something very dramatic, like, "Wow, my blood forgives you. You get to go into heaven." Yeah. But it does paint this picture of in and out, and you just pray to God that you're in.
Yeah.
But that sounds very different from, I think, what Jesus is going to present about this banquet.
I think so.
All right, so we got that, and then one of the other questions I want to ask at the end of the message is a little bit about this day of resurrection, or resurrection of the righteous. Because one of the things we talked about a lot in this podcast is how the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of God is something that's happening here and now. To me, this story sounds a lot like what's going to happen in the end time. So I want to find out, I want to dive into that a little bit more and make sure that we have an understanding there, that we don't have like a major contradiction of ideas there. All right, this is Questioning Christianity. We hope that you will interact with us and let us know what you think. Pose questions. You can do that through our website, questioningchristianitypodcast.com, or on facebook.com/questioningchristianity. We're going to head into the auditorium for today's message. We'll come back to the table here with some wrap-up comments, and we'll talk to you then.
Luke chapter 14, beginning with verse 24 in just a minute. I'm not going to read the whole passage, but Jesus is at a banquet of we're told, a prominent religious leader, somebody who is respected in the community as a religious leader. And Jesus does some things at that banquet. One thing is he heals a person, and it's on the Sabbath day. And so already Jesus has broken the Jewish law. When you show up for a banquet at a devout Jewish person's house and you break the Jewish law, you're off to a bad start. And then Jesus says some things, and this is where I want us to pick up with verse 12. Jesus said to his host, so he's talking to the religious leader, when you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or sisters, your relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back and you'll be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. Jesus is into deep Jewish theology at this point. The reason I wanted to read those verses is because those verses trigger what the next person says in the text. One of those at the table, we don't know who, but one of the people at the table who is an invited guest, when they heard him say this, he said to Jesus, Blessed is he who will eat at the feast in the kingdom of God. So, Jesus has said, when you have a dinner, when you have a banquet, invite the poor, the lame, the crippled. And then this person says, blessed is he who will eat at the feast in the kingdom of God. Now, what is that about? Why did he say that? Well, as a visiting rabbi, Jesus is invited to share his views about things. And this statement is an invitation for Jesus to step in and share his views about this deeply held Jewish belief about the feast that will be in the kingdom of God. Sometimes it's called the Messianic feast. Here's what I want you to remember about this. The feast in the kingdom of God was a prophesied great banquet to be held at the end of history, during which people from all nations will celebrate God's salvation. At the end of the age, there will be a great feast when God, in his glorious kingdom, has guests around his table, and the idea is to be not excluded from the banquet, to be a part of it. And there were some really, really strong opinions about who would be at the banquet and who would not be at the banquet. And one of the things that rabbis were asked on a regular basis is, Rabbi, who do you think will be at the banquet? How exclusive is the guest list? It must be very exclusive. It's the banquet at the end of the age for those who are a part of the kingdom of God. Now, there had been talk about this down through the centuries. Isaiah wrote about this. And this is what Isaiah said about the banquet. He said, on this mountain, the Lord Almighty will prepare a feast of rich food for all peoples. That's my emphasis added. For all peoples, a banquet of aged wine. Baptists can't read that line. The best of meats and the finest of wines. On this mountain, he will destroy the shroud that enfolds all peoples, the sheet that covers all nations. He will swallow up death forever. The sovereign Lord will wipe away the tears from all faces. He will remove his people's disgrace from all the earth. The Lord has spoken. For Isaiah, 600 years before Jesus, the banquet, the feast described is radically inclusive. It's radically inclusive. It is for all peoples and all nations. But now down through the history, particularly as the nation of Israel is oppressed and abused by all nations, the Gentiles, they began to narrow the guest list. I mean, who wants to have your oppressors at the banquet? Y'all following me? Some of you may have a great relationship with your boss, but if you have a really bad relationship with your boss, how often do you invite him home for dinner? And so by the time Jesus is on the scene, there are other people talking about how exclusive the guest list will be, and it has been narrowed down. Ken Bailey helps us to see this a little bit. I'm going to share some words from him. He says that some very devout Jews, now these are not mean people. These are devout people. These are the most devout people around when Jesus was conducting his ministry. But they believed that no Gentiles would be present at the banquet. Only pious Jews who observe the law would be allowed to attend. So Jesus has been asked a question about the great feast at the end of the age. Who will be there? This is the common thought of the day, that for sure Gentiles wouldn't be there. Only Jews. Beyond that, there was a religious community that lived close to the Dead Sea who wrote this thing called the Messianic Rule, and they narrowed the list even more. Bailey points this out. He quotes from the Messianic Rule here. No one who can attend the banquet who is smitten in his flesh, or paralyzed in his feet or hands, or lame or blind or deaf or dumb or smitten in his flesh with any visible blemish. If you're disqualified from worshiping in the temple in Jerusalem, which all these people would have been because they would have been considered unclean, if you're disqualified from worshiping in the temple in Jerusalem, then you're disqualified from the feast at the end of the age. The guest list is becoming narrower and narrower. It's a very exclusive guest list. And so when this man asked Jesus this question, when one of those at the table asked him, "Blessed is he who will eat at the feast in the kingdom of God," or when he makes that statement, he is inviting Jesus, what's your opinion? What's your opinion about who will be at the feast in the end of the age? And so Jesus says, "Let me tell you a story." That's what Jesus does. Jesus replied, "A certain man was preparing a great banquet, and he invited many guests. And at the time of the banquet, he sent his servant to tell those who had been invited, 'Come, for everything is now ready.'" Now, they did banquets similar to what we do special events. They got advance notices about the banquet that was going to be held on a certain day so that they could prepare in advance to be there. We would call those invitations. We get save the date notices. Then we get an invitation. Then we get a reminder that you've got an invitation in the mail. And on Facebook, we can say whether we're going to be there or not. Anyway, so they would get advance notice that there's going to be a feast. And then the day of the feast, when it was ready, the host of the banquet would send runners throughout the community to say, "It's all ready. It's ready. So come on. Ring the dinner bell." So that's the scene here. But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said, "I've just bought a field and I must go and see it. Please excuse me." Another said, "I just bought 5 yoke of oxen and I'm on my way to try them out. Please excuse me." And still another said, "I just got married, so I can't come." Craig Bloomberg says that these were all equally extraordinarily lame excuses. And everybody knew it. Nobody would buy a field and then go see it. Especially in a world where the terrain and the topography is so different from one region to another. You might end up with a rocky field and you wouldn't buy that without going to see it. It's like, you guys wouldn't buy a house sight unseen. So everybody knows that's a stupid, lame excuse. Nobody would go buy 5 yoke of oxen and then go try them out. 5 yoke of oxen, they're going to have to be able to pull together. So you would go try them out first. You wouldn't buy them and then try them out. What in the world is going on here? And one writer says that this last excuse is the worst of all. Because, first of all, he doesn't even ask to be excused. He just says, "I'm not going to show up." Second of all, from what we understand, it doesn't come through in the English translations, but the person is being very crude toward his wife and speaking in ways that would have been thought of as very non-respectable in that day. And so all these guys give really, really, really bad excuses. What are they doing? When I don't want to do something, I try to make up a good excuse. My wife will ask me to do something. Most of the time I say, "Yes, honey, I'll be happy to." Sometimes I don't want to. And I'll try to come up with a good excuse. I've got a friend, sometimes I'll invite him to go fishing with me or camping with me, and he hates, I know he's not going to accept the invitation, but he'll say, "No, I'm sorry, that day I'm already committed, I've got to boil out my combs." Now, what's that about? He's trying to let me know, please understand, I don't want to go camping. Now, these people are making a statement to the host. They're saying, "We don't want any part of your banquet." They're boycotting the banquet. These guests are making a formal protest of the banquet when they say, "No, can't come, bought a piece of land, got to go look at it." Can't come, bought some oxen, got to go try them out. They're trying to put it in the host's face. "No, the kind of banquet that you throw, that you host, we don't want any part of." Now, how does this play in the ministry of Jesus? From the beginning of the ministry of Jesus, his banquets have been boycotted by the religious leaders. From the beginning of the ministry of Jesus, some religious leaders boycotted the banquets at which Jesus practiced what we call open table fellowship. They didn't make any pretenses of it. They didn't try to hide it. They said, "If you're going to host tax collectors, and sinners, we're not going to show up. Jesus calls a disciple, back at the beginning of Luke chapter 5, he calls a disciple named Levi, who is a tax collector. Levi throws a great banquet. And he invites his tax collector friends and other sinners. And the religious leaders show up and they say, why is it that you sit down at the table with people who are excluded, who won't be at the kingdom feast at the end of the age? That's what they're saying. Let's continue the story. The servant came back and reported this to his master. Your banquet is being boycotted. The owner of the house became angry. Notice that when the owner of the house became angry, he channels that anger into gracious action. So he became angry and ordered the servant, go quickly into the streets and alleys of the town and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame. Now, when you read this, it kind of indicates like, well, my A-list didn't come, and so I'm going to go now to the B list. The VIPs turned me down, so now I'll go to the crippled, the blind, and lame. No, the crippled and the blind and lame have already been invited. That's why the A-list wouldn't come. You see that when the servant replies, sir, the servant says, what you ordered has been done. It's already been done, but there's still room. The A-list didn't show up. There's still room. And then the master told his servant, go out in the roads and the country lanes and compel them to come in so that my house will be full. Most people believe when Jesus says compel them to come in, he's talking about go out further outside of our little community. That would have been understood. Go outside of the Jewish community and invite the Gentiles in. Invite those who are disqualified from temple worship to come in, and invite those who are outside of Judaism to come in. Everybody needs to come in so that my house will be full. I tell you, not one of those who are invited will get to taste of my banquet. Not because now Jesus won't let them come. They exclude themselves. They don't want to come. It's not because the host won't let them come. Here's the central message that I want us to take away. No one is excluded from the great banquet. No one is excluded from the great banquet. Anyone who will come in may come in. Anyone who will accept the invitation to come into the banquet at the end of the age gets to come into the banquet at the end of the age. This is the radical message of grace that Jesus was boycotted for. This is the radical message of grace that Jesus was criticized for. Jesus was practicing great grace. This is what this story is about. A couple of ways to apply this. We need to take Jesus' instruction, do not judge, seriously, found in Matthew chapter 7, verse 1. We need to take that instruction seriously. We don't get to decide who will be at the banquet and who won't. We need to take this instruction, do not judge, seriously. We don't get to decide who will be at the banquet and who won't. Sometimes somebody will come to me with a question that goes something like this. Pastor Rob, what about that person who was born in a part of the world and they grew up and they never even heard the name Jesus? Will that person be in heaven? Well, I've got some opinions about that. I'm sure other people have some opinions about that. But here's the bottom line. You don't get to say. That's not your territory. It's not my territory to get to decide. What about this group of people? What about this religious group or that religious group who grew up with their, indoctrination? What about them at the end of the age? Well, you don't get to say. That's not your job. What we get to do is proclaim Jesus. We proclaim Him as the way, the truth, and the life. And then at the end of the age, the host of the banquet will get to decide. By the way, if this is any indication, the guest list is pretty inclusive. You and I, that's not our job. We don't get to make that call. Sometimes somebody will say, yeah, I know. This is what I heard this growing up an awful lot. Yeah, I know, I can't judge, but I can be a fruit inspector. Anybody ever hear that one? Am I the only one? I can see the fruit growing on the tree, and I know whether or not that dude's in or out. Yeah, but the problem with that is when I do that, and I have done that, I still do that. The problem with that is when I'm looking at your fruit, I have to look past all the rotten fruit hanging on my tree. Jesus said it this way, if you're going to get the speck out of the eye of your neighbor, you're going to have to work around the beam that's sticking out of your own eye. You see, if we're going to get excluded because of fruit, we're all going to get excluded, right? Can I get a witness to that? You and I don't get a say in the matter. All right, we proclaim Jesus. Unapologetically, in love, we proclaim Jesus. We let the host of the banquet deal with the rest of it. Be careful who you refuse to eat with. You may be seated beside them at the great banquet. I like this one. Why is it that the Jewish leaders boycotted the banquet? Because if they sit beside some of these people, the lame, the crippled, the blind, they would become ceremonially unclean and they would not be allowed to go into the temple to worship. These are devout people. They're very earnest people. They want to do the right thing. But they've got to be careful because if there's somebody that they refuse to sit with, they may exclude themselves from the banquet. I always like to think of the scene at the end of the age, at the Messianic banquet, at the great supper, and we're sitting there. Don't you think that Jesus is going to have a sense of humor? And he's going to take a person who is a racist and sit him beside somebody that's, of a different race. Don't you think he'll do something like that? So if you're a racist, find somebody that's of a different race and go sit beside them now. Practice now for the great banquet. Because you don't want to be uncomfortable at the Messianic banquet, do you? One more, and then we're going to quit. If a religion or faith group has excluded you, don't worry. Jesus hasn't. So come to the table. Have you ever felt like that somebody has excluded you because of something you've done or something you failed to do or because of some way that you dressed or acted or something that didn't fit in? Here's the good news. Churches and religions may exclude. They have down through the history of the church. But Jesus doesn't. If you want to come, if you'll accept the invitation, then you get to be at the banquet, no matter who you are. Real quickly, Jesus told another story one time about a young man who spit in his father's face, took his inheritance money, and went away to a foreign country and wasted it all in wild living. You remember that story? He ran out of money, and he got hungry, and he thought to himself, maybe I'll go home and my dad will feel sorry for me, at least give me a job. So he goes home, and his dad doesn't accept his apology and give him a job. What does he give him? A feast, a banquet. And then there's another brother in that story. He's a good brother. He's devout. He's devoted. He loves the Father. He's worked hard. He's done everything right. But when the Father opens up the feast for the rebellious son, he says, hey, if he's on the guest list, take me off. You see, here's the thing. It's not just sinful, ugly, awful behavior that will cause you to miss out on the great banquet. Sometimes you'll miss out on the great banquet because you're not willing to sit down with the people who have had awful, sinful, ugly behavior. But here's the invitation today. The invitation is for everybody to come to the table.
All right, this is the QCP with Dan and Rob. And Rob, I just wanted to follow up with you on a couple of things that come to mind after listening to the message. I guess the first thing about this passage that strikes me as a little bit unusual comes in verse 12. So we're in chapter 14, verse 12. So Jesus says to the host, when you give a lunch or a dinner, don't invite your friends, your brothers, your sisters, your relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back, and so you'll be repaid. Anyway, it just seems like a weird thing to say.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, we're saying that this table is inclusive, but it sounds like Jesus is going a step further and saying all the people who thought they were included are excluded. Am I reading too much into that?
I would say it this way. I think that a lot of the people who thought they were included were thinking that they were going to be included in something that they saw much differently. And so they end up being excluded, but not because the king excludes them, or not because the host excludes them, but because they exclude themselves. They decide not to go. I do believe that this idea of don't invite your rich neighbors because they might invite you back and be repaid, I think that is just a way for Jesus to keep bringing us back to this central theme that he has of leveling the ground for everybody. In the ancient world, as in this world, everything was very well structured and stratified. You were a part of this particular group within this caste system, and you interacted in that group, and you didn't do anything outside of that group. You couldn't go above your level, and you wouldn't go below your level. And so, you did, everything was reciprocal within your group. Jesus said, break out of that group, go invite the people who you normally wouldn't invite. They're not going to be able to repay you. And Jesus would say in other places, but you'll be repaid in other ways. Jesus is constantly trying to tear down all of that structure. And I believe we still, desperately need to tear that down.
Oh, absolutely. It just seems to be human nature.
Yeah. But you'd be surprised at what you find out when you do break out of that, or you have some opportunity to break out of that. When you get that invitation to somehow break out, jump on it, because you'll discover, man, this is opening up a whole new world for me. I'm seeing the world around me in different ways. I'm seeing myself in different ways. An example of that, I think, is when we have opportunity to work with or to interact with like homeless people, or, people that when we've talked about this before, we see them, but we don't see them. We don't give ourselves a chance to get to know who they are. What I've discovered in my opportunities to interact with those people is that I come away from that being enriched by them. It truly is like the Matthew 25 passage where Jesus says, when you do something for the least of these, you're doing it as unto me. And so you would never think of interacting with Jesus and not walking away enriched by it. Mm-hmm. And so I think we should look at interacting with other people the same way. Every person that we have the opportunity to interact with, we're going to be enriched by it in some way if we're open to it.
You mentioned about like these different caste systems, and I can almost think about it today, like upper class, middle class, lower class, poverty line, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Is Jesus' ultimate goal to eliminate those sorts of systems, or is it just? I know there's a passage where he says something like, "You'll always have the poor," so it's just like, let's make the best of this situation. I'm just curious if you had any insight into that.
Sometimes I think we read too much into the "you'll always have the poor" line. The context in which Jesus says that, he's not really actually trying to address the problem of poverty. He's responding to, the disciples are complaining because Mary has poured out this expensive ointment on Jesus' head, and they say, "Oh, we could have used that to feed the poor."
Oh, okay, I gotcha.
And Jesus is like, chill out. You're going to have poor to take care of. Don't worry. Yeah. You'll always be able to do that. I don't think that Jesus is saying, into eternity forever, we'll always have poor people.
It's part of my plan.
So, I think that Jesus, I think that what we talk about so much, Dan, the kingdom of heaven, is in its most beautiful expression, this realm and this reality where all of those divisions and categories are broken down, and human beings live lives of flourishing in peace and tranquility, what the Jewish people call shalom, under the kingship of God. Mm-hmm. We're supposed to be living out that as much as possible now, and moving every day, closer and closer to the perfection of that.
Okay. Yeah, and that kind of leads into the question I talked about at the beginning of the show that I wanted to make sure that we got into. Was this idea of the day of resurrection, or I think it's called the resurrection of the righteous, or maybe it's called a couple of different things. We say the kingdom of God, and really the Sermon on the Mount was a sermon that basically said the kingdom is here, and here's how it's supposed to work. And we believe that in its fullest, I guess, most complete form, that is going to be in the future at some point. What is this resurrection of the righteous? What is this, how is this different than like the judgment day picture I guess I painted at the beginning of the episode?
Yeah.
It seems like this parable is very much about salvation or the afterlife.
Mm-hmm. And that's certainly the way that the people that were sitting around at this particular banquet and Jesus is telling this story, that's what they had in mind, I believe. Okay. There was in the Jewish culture, as well as, and it carries over into the Christian culture, of course, this deep belief that there would be this time when there would be a resurrection, and a resurrection of the righteous, a resurrection of the just, and God would make everything right. And so in Christianity, we believe that there will be a resurrection, and there will be a resurrection of the just and the unjust. There will be a judgment. Jesus is going to work all that out. That's not our job to even begin to try to figure all that out. Mm-hmm. But it does go along, the idea of resurrection, or this thing that we look forward to as the resurrection, sort of coincides with this consummation of the kingdom, this ultimate fulfillment of God's kingdom, when, as the writer of the book of Revelation says, when the New Jerusalem comes down out of heaven, and God makes his dwelling with men, and everything is the way that it should be. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I hadn't planned to go in this route, and if this is too far of a tangent, just let me know, and we'll cut bait and get back to it. But okay. Resurrection, what would that be like? I guess the word resurrection makes me think of Jesus rising from the grave. Does that mean that people who have died will then come back to life? When we die, do we immediately go to heaven, and then they're just coming down with heaven? Do we have any idea what does the resurrection part mean in the day of resurrection, or the resurrection of the righteous?
It's a really great question, and I don't know that we can satisfactorily answer that question. I have lots of questions about it myself. What I do believe is that central to the Christian faith is that through the resurrection of Christ, death has been defeated. So ultimately, death will have no claim on those who are in Christ. So we believe that we will be raised from the dead, especially in an Enlightenment thinking, and now they claim we're in post-Enlightenment. I'm not sure that we are. But our thinking is so locked in to this concrete thought. We've all been taught to be mathematicians at heart. 2 + 2 = 4. Math is this immovable kind of discipline, and that's the way we think everything has to work that way. And so we miss out on the deep mystery that is a part of, I think, all religions, but especially Christianity. Paul talks over and over again about the mystery of Christ. The mystery of Christ. He's not saying that we can't know anything about Christ. He's saying that all of this goes beyond our ability to put it into a formula and make a package deal out of it. I would say if you're the kind of person who really needs things to be wrapped up in a nice little bow, I would challenge you, before you write off this idea of resurrection because you can't put it in a mathematical formula, just remember the universe that we live in is so vast, and the Creator is so great and in some ways unknowable, that these things that we can't imagine happening in this realm, I believe, have not only the potential of happening, but the promise of happening in some other realm that we just can't even see right now. Now, let me say it this way. If you write off the idea that somehow God is going to resurrect and redeem this whole human project, if you write that off as an impossibility, then basically you're saying, I've pretty much got the universe figured out. And there's no surprises left that the universe can spring on me.
Okay. So a little bit of an arrogant sort of position to take there.
Well, I don't know if
you're
it's
honest with
arrogant,
yourself.
but we've been taught to be that way, I think.
That's true.
You know? Yeah. I'm just saying what I would call intellectual humility is a good thing, you know.
So we may not know how this resurrection thing is going to happen, but Jesus paints this very clear picture that however this goes down, this table will be very inclusive. Mm-hmm. We've referenced the author C.S. Lewis from time to time on the show, and we have a couple of his books listed on our reading list on our website, questioningchristianitypodcast.com, and I think we've got The Great Divorce on there.
Yeah.
But, critics of C.S. Lewis, and I guess probably of you, if they're listening to this, but it's nice to be in the same
I'm
conversation.
In that company.
I guess critics of C.S. Lewis would call him a universalist.
Yeah.
So basically this idea that this all-inclusive table includes all faiths, all nationalities. And I mean, is that what we're saying? Is there a difference between universalism and what Jesus is describing?
If I had to guess, I would say that C.S. Lewis would say, no, I'm not a universalist.
Yeah,
but he would say that based on partly the evidence of what he writes in The Great Divorce. There are people all through that book who exclude themselves from the kingdom of heaven. All through the book, people are making the decision to go back to hell. That's their comfort zone. That's where they want to be. We have in Isaiah, I think it's in Isaiah chapter 60. Isaiah has this great vision of the great banquet and this place where the New Jerusalem, when it's the way that God wants it to be, the gates will never be shut. The gates will always be open. The writer of the book of Revelation, I'll flip to it and read it. Toward the end of the book, he comes back to that. This is a good Jewish person influenced by Isaiah, and he comes back to this idea again. Let me pick up and just read some. He's describing the New Jerusalem. He says it had a great high wall with 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels, and on the gates the names of the 12 tribes of the sons of Israel were inscribed. And then he goes around the whole perimeter of the city. On the east 3 gates, on the north 3 gates, on the south 3 gates, and on the west 3 gates. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them the 12 names of the apostles of the Lamb. And he goes on to say he sees no temple in the city. The temple is the Lord God, the Almighty Lamb. The city has no need of sun or moon to shine upon it. It's this whole different realm. Don't read this too woodenly, literally, and worry about what happened to the sun or the moon. It's this different realm.
Yeah.
He says, for the glory of its light and its lamp is the Lamb. The Lamb of God, the Lamb that was slain is the major figure in the book of Revelation. And then listen to this. He says, by its light shall the nations walk. It's really inclusive. It's not just Israel, it's nations. And the kings of the earth shall bring their glory into it. And its gates shall never be shut by day, and there shall be no night there. In other words, the gates will never be shut.
Okay.
And they shall bring into it the glory and honor of the nations. Another place, he says that the tree of life is there, and it's there for the healing of the nations. So it is this very, very inclusive picture. Now, here again, I don't think of myself as a universalist, because I do believe that there will be some people who will choose very definitively, no, I don't want anything to do with that city, and I'm not going to walk through those gates. Mm-hmm. But the gates are open, and the invitation is always there. It's always extended.
Yeah. And, I've always heard the word gospel means good news. I don't know if that's true or not, because I didn't study Greek. But that, to me, sounds like good news.
Yeah.
That we are invited. And you, as part of the podcast family, are invited to let us know what you think. You can do that through our website, questioningchristianitypodcast.com, or on Facebook.com/questioningchristianity. I don't know why I had to think about that for a second.
Yeah.
But we would like to hear from you. If you've got some pushback, some criticisms, your questions, suggestions for the show, let us know what you think.
If you have criticisms, you will not be the first.
That's right, or the last. And if this podcast has been helpful, we hope that you'll share this with one friend this week. And Rob, anything you want to say before we wrap
I think
up?
I've talked way too much already.
All right. QCP out.